I might have been wrong. Fancy that. And Redditors might have straightened me out. I'm talking about my recent video rejecting the belief in channeling and questioning the value of WDT and other elaborate puck prep rituals. I said that basket fill volume, maintaining the correct flat headspace over the puck, is the key to good shot mechanics, a claim that was received with some hostility, apparently in a Reddit forum, or thread, or whatever they call it. A persistent criticism was that I had used dark roasted coffee beans of low density, which made it too easy for me to avoid channeling. The coffee sample I used didn't provide enough of a challenge to make the experiment valid. Well, actually, in the first video, Channeling and Puck Prep, I used an Ethiopian landrace at 745 grams per liter, which is rather dense. And for the second video, Grinder Anxiety, I used a somewhat denser channel-washed Kenyan at 752 grams per liter. But density aside, I was told that my samples were roasted too dark to give reliable results. So today we're going to look into all of that. First, I'll use hard, very high-density beans roasted lightly, and then I'll switch to some lower-density beans roasted darker to see if this objection is valid.
Oh my God.
It's like a miracle.
Sample 1 is a high-grown SHB grade, that is strictly hard bean, bourbon Antipica blend from Guatemala with a density of 755 grams per liter. Sample 2 is a lower altitude bourbon Antipica blend from Peru that comes in at 722 grams per liter, which is still fairly dense, but noticeably less so. I wanted to use the same cultivars for today's illustration to have as few variables as possible. A few critics really went on about my dark roasted beans. I thought some had a snippy tone, implying that I'm unsophisticated in my tastes and should therefore not be taken too seriously. Dark coffee being the equivalent of wine coolers or something. Let me show you how foolish that criticism is. I just showed you a coffee sample. Let's look at it again. And wow, what a difference! The camera settings and lighting obviously have to be identical here because this is only one clip, and as for my editing, very little is changed. The contrast level, color saturation, and highlight controls are all set to the same values. The only difference between these two versions of that clip is shadow control and color temperature. That's it. But look at the difference! I could have made this even more dramatic if I had filmed the sample twice using a different lighting arrangement and different camera settings. Appearances can be deceiving, so it's best not to presume to know what you're looking at on YouTube. So first, the supposedly impossible light-roasted, dense, hard beans. I took these off the roast just after first crack. This is as light as I'm willing to roast. Beans that haven't completed first crack are undercooked. There's no way I'm going to abort flavor development. I'm a culinary guy. Undercooking and overcooking offend me. I'm just going to tamp normally without any fancy rituals. 16.5 grams here to fill the basket properly, leaving the correct headspace, which, as I have said repeatedly, is the most important factor in good shot mechanics. Dump and shake, quick tamp, and here we go. Coffee should be spraying out all over the place. Any second now. Well, you knew where this was going. Well, most of you did anyway. Okay, now let's try some lower density beans, roasted kind of dark. And when I say dark, this is my limit. I don't like them oily. At that point, they start to develop a char that brings the same flavors to different beans. So I want to avoid that, and the surface oil oxidizes quickly, making the coffee taste stale too soon. These were just about to head into second crack, and that's as far as I'm willing to go, because overcooking, like undercooking, is not a style, it's a defect. 15.8 grams now to get the correct fill, versus 16.5 previously. And again, a simple shake and tamp, nothing fancy. Well, what do you know? No change. Well, nothing noticeable anyway. This is just an illustration of what I've known intuitively forever. Coffee density and hardness play a minor role in shot mechanics. I'll allow that denser coffee might be a bit less consistent because we have to grind finer and tamp firmer to provide enough resistance. So this could take you slightly outside your routine comfort zone, but not very far, really. Anyway, you can trust me or not. Life is too short. I'm an old man, and I really don't give a shit.
I believe anything you say. That's up to y'all, really.
I think I've pretty well debunked the myth of channeling and the myth that dense and/or light-roasted beans are exceptionally difficult to work with. My advice? Use a competent grinder, maintain proper headspace over the puck, and tamp sensibly. That will address 90% of your problems with shot mechanics. Now, as for why I don't drink light-roasted espresso, that's because my water has abnormally low residual alkalinity. If you like light roast espresso, I'll wager you have really chalky alkaline water, or you stick to milk drinks. Let me show you what I'm talking about. This is a lot more accurate than litmus papers. I'm calibrating on a pH of 4, which is roughly where I expect my results, between 4.5 and 5.5. First up, the light roast, the very hard beans, and we hit a pH of 4.95. It tastes as sour as lemon juice. It's thin on the palate, which doesn't have to be bad in itself, but in this case, the flavor is truly monotonous, and the overall effect is of failure. I suppose if you drown it in steamed milk, you might not hate it, but I wouldn't dream of serving this to anyone. Next, the Peruvian sample. It tasted rich and syrupy on the palate and showed just the right acidity with my water, perfectly balanced with the bitterness, roasted to bring out complexity and that mysterious flavor that I can only say reminds me of the smell of an old library, sort of leathery and hardwoody and bookish in the best possible way. Just a delightful drink with a pH of 5.5. This, being on a logarithmic scale, means that the hard beans were 5 times as acidic, which explains why the coffee tasted like shit. So there we are. Hard, light beans aren't a special problem so long as you have the right water. They might be slightly more challenging to work with, but not in a way that you can't overcome with a little bit of understanding and manual skill. Now, I wonder if this video will make it back to whichever Reddit forum the earlier one was posted to. I'm not expecting any mea culpas or apologies, but I don't mind. Well, that's about all for today. I have more coffee and other content in the works, plus some interesting new equipment to show you. So keep in touch. Cheers!